welcome to today's webinar demonstrating campaign ROI with Marketo reporting. Now, many of you probably have joined this webinar with the view that Marketo's reporting capabilities are pretty poor. I'm here to tell you maybe there's a different way of looking at it. Maybe there's a different approach to the information that you're looking to get from Marketo. So I'll use a common scenario in today's webinar to talk about reporting and analytics within the platform. And importantly, as I say, any questions that you get throughout the session or that you already have, feel free to throw them into the Q&A and we'll get to those towards the end of this webinar. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm James Fletcher. I'm one of the Marketo Solutions Architects here at JTF Marketing. And today we're going to cover the challenges around reporting in Marketo, the requirements of what makes reporting possible in Marketo Engage, and importantly, some of the essential reports that you can use. We'll talk about my favorite topic of all time, which is the revenue cycle modeler within Marketo. So any of you who've been on a webinar with me before, you'll have heard me bang on about it. You will hear me talk about revenue models once again. All cheers after at the end, right? So let's get started. So if you've never heard of us before, we are a specialist Marketo consultancy. We focus on maximizing Marketo as an investment in your business and helping you align its capabilities to some of your business challenges. We work across a range of industries, across a range of use cases, and really, we love a good challenge. We're very technical when it comes to the platform, but we also have the business experience in order to apply it best to your business. So if you've got any challenges, even if it's not related to reporting, I would love to hear from you. I'd love for the unsolvable challenge to come my way in order to see whether we can help you overcome any of those challenges. And if you need to, reach out to us on social media or directly to the email that comes to your inboxes. Let's get stuck straight in. What makes good reporting, or what are the requirements for good reporting within Marketo Engage? There's a couple of different ways to look at this. The first one is data quality, and we all know that if you've got poor data, you get bad reports. Really, for me, within Marketo, we always look at building always-on data management and hygiene programs. There's a specific webinar on that. If you want to find it, it's in our resources section. And again, we're looking for exceptions, right? We can't always have 100% clean data, 100% up-to-date data. We're looking for the exceptions that we can manage on an ongoing basis and overall improve the way that our data is managed and its cleanliness. Now, if you are interested in a visualization of that data set, we have our tool ArrowMerge, where you can get a free data hygiene report. We'll include that in the follow-up email as well, which you can then get a visualization of how does your data currently look? What are the opportunities to improve? And in some cases, is there any cost-saving opportunities? The second thing after you get the data piece right, which of course is pretty critical, is starting to then look at your processes. So of course, if you want to throw around some buzzwords, there's marketing operations, revenue operations, or just good campaign execution, whatever way you want to coin it. Again, getting those processes consistent and the measurements consistent are really important. I'm going to focus in on a couple of these today as we go through some more of these slides that I've got. And it's very theoretical, forgive me, because there's a lot of context to add in here. But one of the most important things to structure within your Marketo instance is using channels and tags, because channels and tags are ultimately the reporting structure within your Marketo instance. Now, you might be wanting to get into some specific detail also around which links did people click, and what were the UTM parameters. There's a big question here around what are you trying to report on? And so again, I'll take you through some of those common questions that I get asked from Marketo users on how do I report on this, for example. Revenue models, I told you I was going to talk about it. Again, visualization of your existing data set within the different stages of the customer journey. And how do you target those? Are you making a difference? Are you progressing people through the funnel, or are you just blasting out email content to them and they're clicking and engaging and not going anywhere? Again, how do we understand whether we're really making a difference on conversions, conversations, and importantly, revenue or pipeline, however you want to look at it? How do we make sure we get visualization of that in Marketo? And I get asked all the time, why is this important if we're already doing it in our CRM? It's important because it will help you personalize, it will help you focus in on the pain points of pushing leads through your revenue cycle. Then finally, there's a destination for reporting, right? So depending on the reports that you want, you may be building them within Marketo, which is what we're going to focus on today. You might be building them in your CRM, so the native connectors, of course, Microsoft CRM, Microsoft Dynamics CRM, and of course, Salesforce CRM. You might be wanting to take the information out of Marketo and present it in a business intelligence tool, Data Studio or Google Looker Studio. Maybe you're using Tableau, Power BI, whatever it might be. You may want to present that as a consistent report across your business on a regular basis. The final piece that's really important for getting good reporting from Marketo is actually expertise and knowledge of how to get there, which is why most of you will be on this webinar today. So hopefully I can give you some tips over the next few slides. So let's talk about channels and tags. So I mentioned to you, it's really important. It's the structure, it's the framework of how do we build reports within Marketo. On the right-hand side, you'll see the screenshot of a channel being edited, and probably you've seen this already. Ultimately, I want to talk you through how is it structured? What does it mean? So we've got a channel. Channels align to the program types. Program types within Marketo, we've got email send, default, event, and engagement. So there are 4 categories of kind of top level containers of campaigns or programs, as we say in Marketo. Within each one of those, we can then start to customize. Now, let's use the default program as a good example, like the one I have on the screen. For default, we use this program type for operational activities. We can use it for paid advertising, direct mail, sales automation tools, whatever we're going to integrate, maybe even social media. How do we bring that information back into Marketo and use it on an ongoing basis? We then have this piece around analytics behavior. So analytics behavior will give us the option between normal and operational. So what does that mean? Well, normal requires a cost period or a period cost in order to better understand the cost per success, the cost per member, et cetera, From an operational perspective, if I'm building a data management program, I don't need to be able to assign a cost to that specific campaign. I am actually going to want to make sure that that is hidden away from any reporting. We then get statuses or progression statuses, program statuses. There's many different terminologies used in the Marketo world for those, which are the different steps, or almost imagine it as a mini funnel of what someone would go through in order to get to a place of success. So in this scenario where we're measuring a download, we might get someone who views the download asset. We might get someone who engages with it. So maybe they're actually poking around, they're reading a bit more of the content on the page. And then we get the people who actually download it. They actually download the piece of content and go and see it. Now, in most scenarios, when we're using gated content, we want people to download our assets. Therefore, we have this little tick next to it, which is called a success. Now, different statuses within the channel specifically are a little bit fiddly. So the steps always have to be in progression orders, or they have to be equal if you want to move people between different statuses. That's getting very specific about channels and tags, and we can cover that another time. There is a blog post on our website as well that talks a bit about it in more detail, but ultimately that's the high level. Now, with Marketo, we get standard channels and tags out of the box, and most of the time we don't customize them because we don't know what they are or how to apply them. So we often are retrofitting channels and tags, program statuses, cost periods in order to get to marketing reporting. So let's talk about cost periods or period cost. What is it? What does it mean? What am I going to do with this? This is your cost for developing each program, each campaign, each activity. And this is one of the areas where most people don't use in Marketo. And I'm sure pretty much most of you on the call today are sitting here going, I've seen that, but I've never clicked on it. I've never used them. If you imagine a world where you're spending money booking a venue for an event, you're booking a speaker, you've got to do your promotion, maybe you're even doing some sponsorships or whatever, some swag. That's all costs associated to this event. So when we start looking at the return on investment from this event, we need to know what the costs were. Now, you might be doing this within your CRM. So a lot of people use Salesforce campaigns to do this. You might be doing it in a spreadsheet. This is an automated way of doing it. We can add in multiple period costs in every program. They can even be date specific. So if you're going to run an advertising campaign, you might choose to put it in January, February, March. You can add the cost in. You can add actual cost in. You can add an imaginary cost in, whatever you prefer. Again, the idea here is to get an understanding of what is effective and what isn't effective. In the scenario where you're doing everything in-house, I always use the recommendation that you should use a pseudo period cost of, let's say, £80 per hour in order to work out what your actual cost is. So if you're building an email campaign and sending an email, how many hours did it take you to write the copy? How long did it take you to build the campaign? And then that is going to be your period cost multiplied by your cost. So you might choose a lesser cost or a higher cost, depending on where your business is based. Again, what's this useful for? Not only to see return on investment, but if you get asked to run more campaigns, you can easily justify more headcount, agency spend, et cetera, because you're looking at it in volume terms and saying, well, if we need to send an extra 15 campaigns a quarter, we're going to need either X amount of people or X amount of money, because that's what it's going to cost us to produce the content, execute the campaign, etc. Cost periods are important if you want to see return on investment and investment versus revenue. So if you want to see the return on that spend, not only cost per success, cost per new name, which I'll come to in a second. If you want to start wondering whether you're actually getting a positive ROI or a negative ROI from different channels, you can actually start to use these period costs. So the big questions that I get asked all the time, and I'm pretty sure some of these you'll resonate with, where did I get my new leads from? How many MQLs have I generated? Have we got any marketing generated revenue or pipeline? How do we identify it? What do we do with it? All of this information sits within Marketo already. So here's a few pointers for where to look for that information. So where did I generate my new leads? We're going to use channels to do that. Which campaign generated the most MQLs? I'm going to use campaigns again, or programs within Marketo. What influences opportunity creation? You might use channels and programs or campaigns for that. So again, what was the last touch? What was the first touch? Again, those are the questions around multi-touch attribution. We've done a webinar on that in the past, but if you've got any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. And then pipeline of revenue, right? We're going to be looking at channels, we're going to be looking at campaigns, we're going to be looking at opportunities and tying all three together. Now, you don't necessarily need a multi-touch attribution tool in order to get this kind of reporting. It's all within Marketo already, within some of the very straightforward reports. So let's start with new name acquisition. How do we get this? The first thing is there's three different ways to look at acquisition within Marketo. And some of you will know this already, and some of you may have this question. What is the difference between acquisition program, original source, and lead source? Well, here are the definitions. Acquisition program is the first program within Marketo that person is captured into. So if I go and fill out a download or a webinar or a roadshow, whatever it might be, I will be booked against that program as a net new person. Therefore, I know that that's the reason that person even exists in my system. That's always useful when you're looking at net new names coming into the system that aren't coming from maybe a data broker or any kind of standard activities like Salesforce, for example. You might get leads coming in from sales. If you really wanted to, you could set up a program to attribute them to a sales generated campaign, which I do recommend. Lead source, of course, is fully customizable. You can do whatever you want with this field, whereas acquisition program is locked in based on the membership of the initial program. And if you've got any empties, by the way, you might also want to see whether the original source type refers back to what the acquisition program should be. And I'll talk about that in a second. Lead source, of course, events, email campaigns, content, search, whatever. This is almost a friendly, where did this person come from? Now, lead source is a little bit painful because, as you'll all know, you've got your first touch, where did I get the person from? Then you've got where the second touch, maybe where did I engage them? Where did I convert them to an opportunity, and what actually closed the business? And you might find that differs on every single client. Let's say if you've got an e-commerce business, your first touch might be an email campaign because people come through. First and last touch, sorry, might be an email campaign because you will come through and immediately purchase from that email. but maybe you would be a typical B2B organization where you generate the name from one source, piece of promotion, you engage them with a webinar, you send them another email campaign, then maybe an SDR contacts them, and then eventually we get an appointment booked in the diary, and then the salesperson is chasing that lead down in order to sell to them. So the last touch is always sales. Again, depending on your attribution model, you may choose to do that slightly differently. From an original source perspective, this is the technical reason for how someone got into the platform in the very first place. Form fill, list upload, integration, API, CRM, etc. Again, you can use those quite often to feed back into building acquisition programs to capture people initially. So search is one you should be building out. Referrals is one you might want to build out. Social is definitely one you want to build out. And if you don't already use Octopost as a social media management platform, I highly recommend going and having a look, because it will actually change your view of social media return on investment pretty rapidly. Now, one of the important things about these reports, because they're people performance reports within Marketo, we can actually use custom columns. So if you look on my example here, you can see the number of new people created within the last 3 quarters grouped by quarter. So you can actually start to see how many new people arrived in my webinar program this week, last month, last year, whatever. And again, this is really important when you start looking at downloads over time, for example. And I know that our head of marketing is going to be sitting there scratching her head going, I knew I asked for that report from James the other day and he didn't remember. But yes, you can do it. And that's really helpful if you're trying to look at trends over time. When we look at program performance within Marketo, we're looking at a couple of different things. We're looking at not only what programs are successful, but we're also starting to look at the cost metric. So when we talk about cost periods, when we talk about successes, cost per new names. So if you get asked the question, what does it cost us to acquire a new person into the database from events, for example, you could run a program performance report, as I've got on the screenshot here, of all webinars and say, tell me what the average cost is per new name or average cost per member. And that cost per member is really important because that is going to be your cost for operating a webinar. And you'll see here on my example, we've got a standard cost for a webinar, which is £2,250. Again, you may choose less or more, or higher or lower, depending on what you do and how you do it. Again, you might be looking at cost per new names. You might also be looking at cost per success. So how many people came to my webinar and actually attended? Now, if you want to talk about length and durations, that's a different challenge. But again, we're looking at the high level metrics here in this scenario. So it's really important to use these metrics to better understand what works and what doesn't. And what you might find is you then start asking your question, does the webinar running at 4 p.m. in the afternoon get more attendance, or is it the one that's run in the morning? And what is the difference in cost of running those webinars? Or if I rerun a webinar, what does that cost? Again, this can be set up for all program types. So when we talk about customizing channels and tags, you'll see here on the left-hand side of my screenshot, within my reporting suite under analytics, I've built out a series of program performance reports in line with my different channels. So downloads, insights, which is our blog site, our blog posts, webinars, and web pages, because I want to see the performance of each one of those. Again, that's why we use channels and tags. We group things together. We don't just look at email performance reports of everything, because that doesn't make sense. We want to start grouping those into specific actions. Email performance on webinar invite, which one performs best, which one doesn't. Follow-up emails or responder emails or trigger-based emails, which work, which don't. Again, how do we then optimize? And that goes into the theme of optimization of content based on results within Marketo itself. Now, if you're starting to think about information surrounding pipeline and revenue, you may have seen the program analyzer report before, which has got these bubbles on the screen. And it's a very, very confusing report because there's no clear instructions on how do you use it, how do you interpret it, and what should it be used for. So after many nights of playing around with it and not a lot of red wine, I got to a fairly straightforward response for this. These reports are comparing 2 metrics together and helping you understand and visualize what works and what doesn't. So if we take this example on the screen, We've got the program cost along the bottom, what costs us as a grouping of channel the most money to operate. And this can be swapped between channel and programs. You can look at specific program names as well. So you can say, did our training event do better online or offline? Therefore, what did it cost us to operate, and what was the income that we had from that program? So the y-axis is then looking at pipeline created in this scenario. It could be revenue. And then the bubble size is based on revenue expected, because that's what we're looking at here in terms of pipeline. And then the revenue to investment, which is the color, is telling us whether, if we closed all that pipeline that we think we've created, would we actually get a return on investment? Now you'll see, and all the events marketers in the world will be cheering right now, webinars are high up the list there in terms of the top performing channel. Now, that might depend, because it might be all that you do. It might be a majority of what you do. And again, you've got to look at those and make sure that all your metrics are in place. Do you have progression status in place? Do you have cost periods in place? Have you got revenue feeding through from your CRM? Therefore, can you start to see it? Well, revenue and pipeline, right? Now, this isn't the easiest report to use. You can use it for revenue generated as well. So it's important to play around with it. It's a little bit fiddly. I think there's cleaner ways of looking at revenue generated through Marketo, but this might be an option for you to better understand what works and what doesn't. Now, I'm going to touch on two things around engagement programs and engagement score, because I think these are two metrics that are really important when we start looking at what works and understanding where can we improve. So the engagement program dashboard for a lot of people is very, very confusing. So let's walk through it very quickly. We've got the overall engagement score of this nurture. We're looking across every single email, every send that we've had through that engagement program, and looking at what's the average score of every email. Now, hold that thought. I'll come back to what the average score is and how it's calculated in a second. We're then looking at the unsubscribe rate. So people who are unsubscribing from any of the email assets within our engagement program. Now, one important thing to note here is that this will say 0 if you're using embedded programs in your nurture campaign. So it's important to remember. We then get the next time that we're going to send any content. And again, that's looking at every stream. We can filter here on the different streams as well. We then get exhaustion. So how many people are in our nurture at each one of the stages? How many emails have they got before we run out of content? And then how many people have missed X number of sends based on the exhaustion of content as well. So we can see here, we've got 4+ sends that have gone and people haven't received anything in our nurture. What does that tell us? It tells us that we need to put new content into our nurture in order to get more engagement. We then get the program statuses down here, which also can change based on your version of Marketo. And then we've got this little configuration part here. What is the highest content, the lowest content, the newest, the oldest, etc. And again, I'll talk about the score in a second. So this visualization helps us better understand what works and what doesn't from an engagement program perspective. Now, I haven't included email metrics in here in this conversation because I'm not a fan. I don't think it's helpful for everybody to talk about how many emails we've sent, how many people click the link. Actually, what are the opportunities to optimize are the important questions. So talking about optimizations, if we take an engagement stream performance report within Marketo and we look at an engagement program, we drill into one of our streams, for example, we'll then see how many emails have been sent and what is the engagement score. Now, I'm going to draw your attention down to this graphic that Marketo share or Adobe share, which gives you an idea of how they work out the score. Now, 100 would be the top performing email across your instance, and 0 would be the worst one, or unscored, as we've got in some cases here, means that there might be something wrong. Now, engagement score is an algorithm within Marketo that's running based on how many people have you sent it through, what's the deliverability rate, what's the open rate, click-through rate, and unsubscribe rate. It works out an algorithm to score that email out of 100 every single time. What we'll then get in this engagement stream performance report is a list of performing emails or underperforming emails. As you can see, we've got some at 90, 79, 50, 40, whatever. You can reverse engineer this and say, okay, the worst email that we've got here, if you ignore the blanks for a second, is 39. Why does that not work? What's happening with that email? How can we improve it? Is it open rate? Is it click-through rate? And again, we can start to look at the metrics and see where can we perform better. Now, if you've got a blank, it might mean that your program isn't set up correctly, or that no one has been successful in engaging in that campaign at all. Now, what we can see here is that people have been engaging, so therefore we've got a success metric that's gone wrong somewhere. So it's definitely worth having a look at that. Again, if you're using engagement programs, really important. And I will start bleating on already about revenue cycle models. So please do use them to structure your engagement programs. Don't use awareness, consideration, all that other jazz, because it's pretty useless. Again, focus in on that sales cycle. How do we get people through the sales cycle, buying, having conversations, engaging with our salespeople in order to start proving the value of marketing? Now, this will really help you align everything that you're doing, and will help you also personalize, because we can take these different groups of people. Let's say, for example, a bunch of people with an open proposal. We want to be sending them brand visualizations all over the web and retargeting them till the cows come home, so to say, and bring the money. And again, this is how we start to tie up the omni-channel approach within Marketo. Now, you're going to be asking me, that's great, James, but that sounds like a lot of work. It's a little bit of effort in order to get a revenue model in place, but you will get this visualization, this report that will really help you talk to the business. Now, the business will always be talking about conversion rates. It will always be talking about velocity. And this is exactly what this report will give you in Marketo. Based on the customizable stages that you put in place, you will then start to see conversion rates between each one of those stages, well, and outside that stage, and the amount of time that someone sits within that stage. Now, if you're constantly optimizing your database, you want to see these conversion rates moving. As you can see in this example, I've got a 0 rate on my conversion from MQL to the next stage. So that's obviously a red flag for us to go away and have a look at and say, why are we not progressing more people to MQL? There could be multiple reasons for it. It could be that people leapfrog the next stage, or it could be that we're not converting any leads. Therefore, we're going to drive more attention into that MQL bucket in order to get more results back into the business. So I am pro revenue cycle modeler, and this success path analyzer report, of course, is pretty useful for visualizing your existing data set and where does it sit in the buying cycle. This is free of charge within your product already, so please do go and use it. And if you need to, come back and ask all the questions that you have in order to get it active within your business. Now, one last thing, and I will take a breath of air before we move on to questions, because I'm almost at time actually, so we're going to run over, apologize, but I will answer all the questions that come through. The Reporting Success Handbook is on our website. Do download it. It gives you some good guidance throughout those different areas of reporting. It will also help you assess your readiness for reporting within Marketo as well. So have you customized your channels and tags? Did you set up your revenue model? Otherwise, I will find you. And have you built your standard reports within Marketo so that you can keep reusing them time and time again and you've got consistent data sets? Feel free to reach out to us. You've got all our contact details on the screen. Of course, you'll have it in the follow-up email. We're open to having conversations. Don't worry, we won't just try and tell you something. We want to help you use the Marketo platform. And I really appreciate your time for joining us today. Do find our next webinar already listed on the website as well around personalization. So I look forward to seeing you on that webinar.